get this. You
It's
do a
because
lot more
that
than
little box came up like half hour ago. So it
it's
was long
okay.
gone.
I know you were on
Sorry.
listening. I know what's going on.
Hello. Sorry, you were in the middle of saying something. I was just all
No,
excited.
no, you're good. I want you to introduce yourself because it's a lot that you have going
I
on and you're
know.
so
I won't
excited.
say it
So tell
all.
everybody who you are, Noelle, so they know who you
Yes. Hi, all my new friends. So my name is Noelle Silver. I used to be Noella Charity. You can find me at both addresses on the Google. But I have spent my career in enterprise technology. So I started off at IBM and I went to Red Hat and I kind of crafted this career of like major tech companies. Most recently went to Amazon when Alexa was born. So that's why I kind of seep Alexa. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit about why that's still the case, even though Google is also out there and I'm totally a Google person. I don't I don't have a Google device, but that's okay. Anyway, but we'll talk about that. And then so I spent 4 years there. I got very interested in AI. I then got very interested in ethics related to that AI, racial bias, gender bias, all sorts of interesting conversations, which then brought me to Microsoft, where I spent 2 years on the cognitive services team, which includes a bunch of other models. So as we think about voice and we think about audio, I got also interested in the audio plus world. Like what happens when somebody, yeah, they can hear, but what if we could also, create a multimodal world? And there's tons of different AI models, just as easy as Alexa to create different, like find out translation is one of them, right? You guys were talking about a company that does 30 language translation. That's
right.
a service. So if you're technical enough, you could actually do it for free for yourself. Watson has 127 languages or something ridiculous. But yeah, so I did that and then I got a little convicted and I wanted to do something that was good for the world and had a mission associated with it as opposed to the big companies. So I went and joined NPR, National Public Radio. But then this whole COVID thing happened. So I did a really big video a couple weeks ago and talked about why I wanted to change. I wanted to be part of systemic institutional change for brown people in tech. So I
Right.
started a blog with a couple of my friends called Teching While Brown and joined a company called Hacker U, where I create university education for everyone. Literally, when I say everyone, I mean like us. The
Wow.
non-traditional learners, those who were not, born to go to university. I'm not a school person. I hated school. I didn't graduate high school. I never graduated college. So I represent someone who is able to become successful regardless of that. And I want more and more people to realize that that's not a barrier to entry, especially not now. We need so many people in tech and we need so many diverse opinions in tech. So now I kind of, as you can see, preach it a little bit. As
I
I
see you.
get
You're just out here being so brave and I love it. I wanted you guys to hear her story because when I met her, it's been over like about a year. I was just taken back by her journey. Her journey was not the usual journey that you hear, and to see all the accolades and the things that she's done is amazing. And I appreciate you, and I'm happy to have you on and ask you
Yes,
questions.
this is so
So the
cool.
first,
Long time coming.
I know, right? So the first thing I wanted to ask you, so people understand, um, what is a skill? When people say skill, what is a skill? Can you
Yeah,
explain to
so
the
on
community?
Alexa, and this is actually true for Google as well, they just call it an action, but it's a voice application. So similar to mobile apps on an iPhone or an Android device, this is a voice application for Google or Alexa or now Bixby, and who knows how many different providers will come up with their own stack that you have to build for. But yeah, an Alexa skill is a voice application that you can build. And once you build it, you have a choice. You can either just launch it to yourself, meaning the devices that you own, or you can publish it to the world. And today that world is about 100 million users. Alexa has by far the largest market share. And so even though all of you Google people, totally fine. But there's a business to be had on Alexa. So
I
I'm
bought
like,
mine.
keep
I
your
bought mine
Google,
because of you.
but then make some money on Alexa.
I talked to her like about a week ago, right? And you were
Yeah,
like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." I have my Echo. Hey
I'm so
Alexa,
glad.
you. I have it because of you because I want to learn how to do skills and teach the community to to build off of it. So okay, so now we know what's a skill.
I know it. I'll try not to say the name very often.
Hey Alexa, stop. You
Talking.
heard her, right?
I did.
So I wanted to ask you also, what is the most challenging part about building a skill? Do you have to be a coder now to build a skill? Or so how can I get a skill as a podcaster made right now?
Yes, so thanks for asking. There is a website, and maybe we could put it in here, called blueprints.amazon.com. And honestly, all of my skills, though these blueprints did not exist when I started, so I had to write mine from scratch, but all of my most successful skills are now blueprints. So just so you know, I built over 100 skills for Alexa. I have over 40 on the platform for multiple different brands, including my own little brand. And I've got some that have been in the top 10, top 20. I've been mentioned, my skills have been mentioned in Forbes and Fortune. And I'm just like a lowly dev who never graduated from high school, right? Like, this is not rocket science, and it's not hard. But the benefit of using blueprints is that with blueprints, you don't have to do any code. All you have to have is a good content idea, which is why I think this audience is so interesting, because you guys already have a good content idea. You already have the hardest part, which is creating good content. So my next step would be go to Blueprints and find there's a skill that allows you to type in your RSS feed for your podcast, and in 15 seconds you can be, moving towards certification, which takes a couple of days, mind you, but no coding, no code at all. Like, you
No
type
code
in
at all.
no code. Now, granted, with that, you have no flexibility either. So as you learn more, you'll realize, ooh, I actually do want to, I want to reward people every time they come back 7 times in a row, or I want to know when it's their birthday, or I want to get their email address so I can market to them. Those are all things available through the API. But you won't, maybe you're not interested in that yet until you start to see the traffic. And one of the other benefits is, even for blueprints, you build a good content skill and start generating traffic. Amazon has this program called Developer Rewards, and they pay you like money. They pay you on a monthly basis for the usage of your skills. And for the last 4 years, I've gotten paid every single month. My first check was $5,200 for the month for skills that I built. I was like, wait, I could quit
So you're
now?
making money.
Does that...
You're making money, right, off of a skill that is constantly used, that people...
Yes. What do
Look
they
at
call
that.
it? Passive income. Yeah, I think that's something
Wow.
we want to do. And I'll give you a really good example. My son, who at the time was 9 years old, built a skill, mythical unicorn trivia. No one ever really used it. We had maybe 6 users a week. COVID happened, and he now gets $70 a month
What?
coming in for that skill based on...
See, he has his own business, his own,
That's right.
own residual, right? I mean, look at that.
And now he's like motivated. He's like, whoa, how do I make this thing better? What do I do?
Right.
But it's
My
a business
God.
model.
So that's good. That was good information, because last year when I first met Noelle, it was an interesting story how everything happened, and I talked about it. And when I met her, she was breaking things down in such a way that I understood. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm sitting next to someone who created a company called VoiceFlow. There was someone else who worked with, I think it was Vayner Media.
Yes, Vader was there.
And I'm like, I'm a little old podcaster. And she's like, oh no, you know what? You know what you're doing. Trust me, you need to be in here. And she actually said, you know what? Do you want to sit with me at the table? And I'm like, me? She's like, yeah. She was like in the front table at Micro. So I was like, okay. And I was like, man.
And it's like VIP dinner. And like there were people waiting outside hoping to get a seat. I'm like, come with me.
You want to come? I was like, okay. And what I loved about everything is that she said something that's important, and it's resonated with me since then, and she says it now, is the diversity that is needed in tech and in podcasting. A lot of times, like things like skills, and we're going to talk about flash briefings next, are kind of intimidating for a podcaster, especially because they're by themselves, they're editing their own content, they're creating their own content. There goes the website, thank you. And you're doing all these features, but yet it might be by yourself. So with something like a skill, it could be more visibility, which is what we're talking about now. I asked you this question, and I was like, oh, and then you broke it down. I was like, okay, I understand it. What is the difference between a skill and a flash briefing?
Yeah, this is a great point, because flash briefings are advertised to be like this great, easy, quick way to get like a podcast in front of your audience. But flash briefings are very special. They are the kind of skill that only plays when you say, Alexa, good morning, or you create a routine for Alexa. You can't just say, hey, play my podcast, like you were talking about earlier. How many of you do that? You can't do that for a flash briefing. If you create your podcast skill as a flash briefing, it'll only ever happen when it's choreographed as part of someone's morning. So they listen to they get the weather report, and then they get NPR, and then they get your podcast. And what I found is that when you do that, if you create a podcast skill as a flash briefing and your podcast is any more than like 3 minutes, what's going to happen is they're going to get into like 3 minutes or brushing their teeth. And then they'll be like, oh, I can't listen to all this right now. And they'll skip right over it. And then you know what happens? Like we do this to ourselves. We never go back to that stuff. And so what I've uncovered is like you can use these blueprints to create a flash briefing that's like a 2-minute trailer, if you will, or a preview of what's going to happen in your podcast. And then you point them right over. And you could do this actually as part of the metadata for your podcast anyway, right? You probably have a little intro or some text. Alexa can read that text. So it's not difficult, but it's very important not to create your podcast skill, the one that literally plays your 20-minute podcast or 15 or anything really over than 2 minutes. You don't want to play that in a flash briefing. You want to create a dedicated skill for that. You want people to be able to go forward and backward. You want them to binge watch or binge play your podcast. And they can't do that in a flash briefing. So it's a really important distinction.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
But I think a flash briefing, you can do maybe a trailer, like a podcast trailer would be like
for
a
sure.
Flash briefing.
Yep, exactly. That's what I would do. And that's what I do now. So I'd rather.
Yeah, because you're a podcaster too. We're going to talk about that too.
Yes.
So,
yeah. I call it like scaling the unscalable. So at first, it's going to feel like you're doing this extra work. But because of the sheer number of users, I've seen people within weeks of launching a flash briefing get hundreds of thousands of listeners just because of the volume in which people listen to Alexa or buy Alexa devices. Every summer, there's an Alexa, what do they call it, Prime Day? Some of us might know it and maybe plan for it. But they do Prime Day, and they sell millions of devices just on that day. And they've had 5 of them so far. Like I said, it's massive, massive audience. And so getting a flash briefing out there really does widen your opportunity as a podcaster to reach more people. So that trailer, even though it's like an extra step and maybe a little extra effort, it's totally worth it because it could basically catapult your audience to a whole new level.
I love that. I appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you, because I know you were like you were in the ground for building Alexa, and you were one of the, you evangelize for Amazon. You travel different countries talking about Alexa. And what I wanted to ask you, as far as the work that you did with voice, do you see other technologies coming out that are going to be easier for podcasts, or do you see that just maybe like skills and flash briefing? Do you see anything else in the future since you've done an array of things with AI?
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is, just based on my experience at NPR, is that combining the audio experience with a visual experience. So there is a new presentation API that allows you to create kind of a visual representation, not necessarily video, but just something to look at. Even if it's text, or if you say something like you mention a link, like you can choreograph this visual experience to create a much more multimodal experience. The other thing is that not everybody, when you podcast, you're just talking to people who hear. And so how do you leverage AI to take your words that you are saying and create a text-based experience for all the people? Like, yeah, you might go on Alexa and you might be on 9 podcast platforms, but would it hurt if you could have a text-based version of your podcast on your website? Absolutely not. And so I actually you guys were talking a little bit about this transcription capability earlier in the show. And one thing I personally use is this service called rev.com. It's been around a long time, but it's basically, you give it an audio file and it spits back either a very cheap, like they use machine learning to do 100% of the transcription. And you have to go in and make little edits because instead of "and," it said "an," right? Like, and it does, especially if you don't enunciate. Like, I talk super fast, so I have to make some edits, but it's worth it for like a 70% discount on the price.
Yeah.
I'll do a little editing. But for more money, you can actually get it human transcribed. So they use machine learning, and then a human does that work for you. But either way, you end up with a transcription that basically is a blog post. I've also seen people use rev.com to actually create the cheap one and then hand it to someone on Fiverr and say, make this into a blog post. And they add subtitles and headings and all of that. And even if your podcast has multiple speakers, Rev can tell the difference between those speakers. Wow. And that's just using an AI model called speech to text, right? It's Amazon has it if you are a techie. If you want to build the API and build a program yourself to do this work, there's Lex on Amazon. There's also Neural TTS or Neural Text to Speech and speech to text at Microsoft. Google Cloud has one. I mean, these are commoditized AI models. So it only makes sense. Like that's the next evolution for us, right? As people building audio experiences, I'm an accessibility person. Like, how do I make this available to someone who can't hear me? Why wouldn't I just make one extra step and poof, get,
Yeah, no,
right? Create a
it's true.
blog
I mean,
post
that
for it.
transcribing thing is, I don't know if have you gone on Soundtrap? Have you used Soundtrap? Have you heard of
Mm-mm.
it?
No, I just
It's,
heard about it today, so I wrote it down. It's on my notes.
yeah, I know you're gonna look at. Yeah, Soundtrap is they're actually owned by Spotify, so you can
Oh,
actually
cool.
collab with any musician around the world. Plug in and rock on and have a studio, and they also have the component of recording your podcast, and it transcribes your audio,
Yeah.
all of it, and
I
you
wonder
can
if
edit.
that's where Anchor, because Anchor is also now owned by Spotify, right? And I'm wondering if that's where they got their new trailer transcription service. But yeah,
Probably, yeah, because
yeah,
they're
interesting.
yep, they're both owned by Spotify. But isn't it? You can edit your we tried
Yes.
it with our podcast, but our podcast is way long, so it takes a long time to update. There's certain kinks and things like that with Soundtrap, but it is a
Yeah.
pretty good. And you can do a video component where you can interview someone
Right.
on a video there too. So
Yeah,
I think
that's
you should
really
check it
cool.
out. It's pretty fun. So another question I wanted to ask you. So we talked about the flash briefing. We talked about the skills. So remember I asked you. I said, so how many podcasters, let's say diverse podcasters, do you know use skills and flash briefings from your experience? Do you know any?
I know. I mean, no. It's a very sad. So two parts of the sadness.
Yeah.
One,
So let's right.
I don't know many people that are doing it. That's not to say that they're not, but I know no one who's talking about it. And even when I like do an open call, please let me feature you. I mean, I'm on dozens of podcasts and webinars and all of these things. I would love to feature the work of, minorities in general, especially in voice. And it's just so hard to find people. And so every time I see, an article that says like 44 experts in voice and there's not a single brown person on there, I'm like, that can't be right. And then I found this community. I'm like, you guys are the same. It's the same. You're one blueprint skill away from being able to be part of that community. But I think it's so important that we get loud because there's a generation of engineers in making that may not choose this path because they don't see themselves, right? They look up at these articles and these, blog posts and they don't see people like us. And that's why I was so passionate when you said it didn't work out for Voice Global. I'm like, oh, it's working out for the next one because we
You
need
did.
more. There's not enough. There's not even a little bit of enough. Every single person listening to this has a story that they could tell because they're here and it's, they're working it. And that's a story that needs to be told and people need to hear it. And that's why we all created podcasts, right? Because we wanted to tell a story. So I feel like you have to take now as you're a leader, whether you like it or not, because there's an entire generation of people, whether they're going to be podcasters or skill builders or developers that are looking for us to be like, yeah, it's okay. The water's fine. Maybe the water's cold, but it's fine. At least we have each other. But
You
yeah,
do.
there's not enough diversity in the voice tech space. And maybe it's just not stated, right? Maybe people are hiding in the shadows, but goodness, let's stop that if that's happening. Like shine a light, be a beacon, bring
I
it.
know, right? But I appreciate that passion that you have and the incredible just commitment to bring in. And I wanted you to tell everyone about your new position and what you're doing at Hacker U, so they understand how intense and how this is just a movement for you.
Yes, for sure. I've really, I've found out recently just in this whole climate of, racial injustice. I don't know about you all, but I have felt like my tolerance level for behavior, bad behavior especially, is just gotten, I have got no tolerance anymore, right? If somebody does something bad or pushes someone down or clips someone's wings and I'm there, I'm like, that's just not right. Just because they're brown, or worse, because they're female and brown. And it just drives me insane. So I was thinking to myself, okay, I could just complain, I could yell, I could scream, I could protest. I'm not a good protester. I'm too like bubbly for protests, right? I don't go roar. I'm like, yay!
You're
It's
like,
not the right
yay! Right.
energy. Yeah. So I was trying to think like, what could I do? And what could I do? And I started to get very interested in systemic change. Like, how does that happen? And unfortunately, I heard this woman tell me, she said to me, and I was like, that, please God, don't let that be true. But she said an entire generation of people will have to die or retire for this problem to go away. And I was like, well, that's not a situation I can live with because I can't change that. But what I can do is I can infuse the workplace with new people that have a new way of thinking, and not just new young people, like anyone from any field can become a data scientist, a data analyst, a full stack web dev. Like, this is not magic. It's not rocket science. It's not given to just a few people who get to learn it. Anyone can learn this skill, just like all of us learned to podcast. This is not something we knew how to do even 10 years ago,
Right.
right? So we all know how to learn. And so I joined HackerU because they partner with major universities to create coding programs. But the key is it's not just, a generic boot camp. It's a university sanctioned program. It's something that used to be sacred and like you'd only get the letter and only 10 people in your whole 150 or in my case 3,000 person class got a letter from University of Miami. And you're like, oh, I guess I'll go to community college or maybe not go to college at all. And now it's accessible. So I'm part of this kind of, my effort is really around how do I democratize this education so anyone can make 100K a year. Like, it shouldn't just be reserved for the people who know the gatekeepers and have the keys.
Right.
Everyone should have the keys. Like, we should be making them, stamping them out and throwing them like confetti.
It's
So that's
true.
what I'm doing now, because I really think that's something we can change. We can change the DNA of engineering teams by training new people and training them on diversity and ethics and what it means to have everyone at the table. And if you don't see everyone, like you don't see a different face in every seat, that something's wrong. And if we
Right.
teach engineers that, they go into companies and they'll look at an all white male table and go, no, this doesn't feel right. But right now, that's not the DNA, right? The DNA is like, they look around, they see everybody looks the same, and they're like, looks good to me.
Right.
So this is what I decided to do, is be part of the change by joining a company that would be able to educate and democratize that education for anyone who wants to learn.
That's beautiful, and I appreciate your passion. Like, this is something that is needed because a lot of times I
Amen.
think even with people of color, it's just right. Oh, it's like that ah moment.
That's right.
It's not sacred. It's not a hidden code that I have to say at a door and they peek in. It
Yeah.
just feels that way because it's very intimidating, just
Yep.
all around tech, and then specifically in the certain spaces that people like us have not been able to be just even allowed to understand, or even a privilege
Yes.
to just learn it even at an early age. I mean,
Yeah.
even
And
from
even
my
the
education where
teachers,
I've been.
like the teachers didn't look like us. They didn't talk like us. Like, it was just completely resistant from the time you started. So if you were lucky enough to get into school, by the time you're in school, you're like, this isn't me. I'm not, like, I didn't see myself. That's why I never finished school, because I was like, I'm not gonna, this isn't my place. But I have an affinity for tech. Thank goodness you can go get a book, go on GitHub, teach yourself. I mean, really, you don't need a boot camp. But I was like, man, what would happen if we actually created a diverse army of instructors that looked like us, like looked like everybody, and that there were people with special, like there could be people with physical handicaps. Do you know that 1 in 5 people have physical handicaps? But in every company I've ever been in, I've never worked with one. How's that possible? Like, where does that gate close for them? Oh.
That's true. And there was someone just in the chat talking about that they had a thyroid condition and they became a personal trainer, and their resilience, and they fought through that. So they're real. There's a lot of people with different things happening, and
Yeah,
we're not mixing in with them. But I just wanted to ask the community if they had a few questions that you
sure.
guys want to ask Noelle just before we wrap up. I appreciate your time. I mean, you can
Thanks,
stay as long as you
TJ.
want. I'm not kicking you off, but I know that after an hour they kick us back on and we jump back in if you
Oh,
want
I
to.
see. I see.
Yes, if
Yeah, I'm
anyone
just
has
looking
any
through, but
questions that
thanks
you want to ask,
everyone for your
Noelle.
comments. It's really cool. It's so nice to meet you all. I hope we get to be friends and hang out. Come to Alexa. We should do a watch party.
You let us know. We're there. When are you
Noelle
doing the watch
Silver
party?
is on Facebook. There's a Facebook page, and we'll be doing a watch party, and I'll be chatting up, with Noelle's version of a lot of these things. I will have my own little section of.
When is it?
It's the day of Alexa Live, like
Oh,
literally.
the day Alexa. Yeah, you're gonna be
Yeah,
on there too. I saw. That's right.
yeah,
Oh, you're gonna be there. That's true.
yeah. So
Guys,
I will
Alexa
be.
Live.
Yeah, we could watch it on Facebook and ask questions. You're like, wait, what acronym was that, or what website did they just say? And we'll like document it all. So
I'll do that because it's from 9 to 1 p.m. on Wednesday. I was talking about it. So
yep.
another thing, real quick, Noelle, can you tell everybody about your AI Institute before
Oh,
we go?
yes. So I started AI Leadership Institute, and mainly was created because not enough executives and business leaders really understand the value of technology and AI, and they're the ones cutting the check. They're also the ones cutting the check for diversity and inclusive data and all of the really hard problems that we're trying to solve. So that's one of the reasons I started. It was I really want companies to know you're not just picking AI, you have to pick AI and then protect that AI with ethics and responsible use of that tech, and make sure that it represents everybody. And mostly, I mean, if you all just take a look at a little bit of algorithmic bias, it's called algorithmic fairness. It is horrific. And so there's a lot of work to be done. So I started the AI Leadership Institute to do that work.
What doesn't she do,
I
right?
know
She
it's
does it all.
crazy.
And she's a mom of four.
I know. Four, and my
Four.
dad lives with me.
Yeah.
And I'm a caregiver. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
So if you
Your
got a
mom,
problem,
dad,
chances are I feel you.
you do. You got a lot going. I appreciate you, and I have so much love and respect for you. So yes, I'm gonna take you up on the watch party. We'll set it up. We'll talk.
Yeah, let's
We'll
do
be in
it.
communication. And also, if you guys want to check out great voice interviews, the voice